Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head down to Belgium for the first time in what seems like quite a little while, and we're going to introduce another brewery to you who I have never tasted anything from before. So this one should hopefully be a very interesting review, and this is one of my favourite styles of Belgian beer. So for this review then we are going to go to Flanders in the west of Belgium, Flandre as you would say in French, Vlaanderen as you would say in Dutch or Flemish. Belgium, of course, is a dual language country, although you do have a very small German-speaking region in the southeast, if I'm remembering correctly. And for this review, we are going to go to Boezinge, which you'll find just to the north of Ecke in the very west of the country. So for this review, we're going to have a look at my first beer from the Leroy Breweries group. This one comes in from the Brouwerij van Ecke range that they have. It is the Kapittel Watou Prio 9, and it comes in 9% ABV, and this one is described as a Belgian strong dark ale, but I think it is very, very close to what you would expect of a Belgian style Quadrupel. As I've told you on the channel before, my favourite styles of Belgian beer are probably the Flanders red ales, the Quadrupels, the Tripels, and I also enjoy a nice Belgian blonde as well. So this is one that I'm very curious to see how it turns out, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. In this instance it is a little bit complicated because this company, the Leroy Breweries group, is an umbrella organisation, and there's two breweries that are very significant in the history of this company, so we will talk about both of those in the video. But as I always say, if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from, or that I will do, sorry, from the Leroy Breweries group in the future. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I said. There's all the usual social media down there too. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Belgian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to whenever I get the opportunity, fairly regularly, but not as regularly as I would like. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Leroy Breweries and the two different breweries then. So Leroy Breweries, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Boezinge in Flanders in the west of Belgium, which can be found just to the north of Ypres, and it's a very kind of small village this by the looks of it. But Leroy Breweries is basically the umbrella organisation. They founded this back in 2016, and it encompasses both Brouwerij van Ecke from Watou and Brouwerij Het Saas, who come from Boezinge itself. So we'll go to Brouwerij Het Saas since this is the older of the two breweries, and we'll start from there, and then we'll take a jump back and talk about Brouwerij van Ecke and how they kind of merged together. So Brouwerij Het Saas was founded in Boezinge back in 1572, and the name of this brewery is derived from a lock that was built on the canal in Boezinge by the Spaniards, which was called Saas locally in the West Flemish dialect. So the brewery was initially owned by the Clarice family, but then it passed over to Carolus Leroy, who was the son of a brewing family from Zuidschoten. He married one of the family's daughters, and then when his father-in-law died, he took over the running of the brewery. The brewery was called De Balve Overdracht for a long period of time, and this remained in the brewery remained in the original location next to the canal until the First World War. The brewery was completely destroyed during the conflict though, and for this reason there isn't too much information available on the brewery before that period of time. But the company was restarted in 1924 by Sylvain Leroy and his wife Rachel Cies. They bought a ruined farm in Boezinge and then founded officially Brouwerij Het Saas. So they continued to brew during the Second World War, and then the brewery passed into the hands of their son Karel in 1952. He oversaw the brewery until his death in 1988, when his sons Philip and Henrik took over the company as the 10th generation of the Leroy family. Philip's son Karel then took over the running of the company in 2016, and this is the same year that the Leroy umbrella company was created. So let's take a little step back now and talk about Brouwerij van Ecke. So Brouwerij van Ecke has a very interesting story as well. Brouwerij van Ecke was inherited by members of the Leroy family back in 1962, and it worked closely with the Het Saas brewery over the coming years. So this brewery had been founded back in 1624, and it was known as the Golden Loaf. and also Brasserie au Lion d'Or in French, of course, and this translates into English from Flemish and French respectively as the Golden Lion Brewery. But this fell into the ownership of the Van Ecke family after a marriage in 1862, and at this point the brewery took on the Van Ecke name, and it was known to produce high fermentation, also known as high alcohol beers. But later in 1950 they began to produce the Kapittel Trappist style beers, which was met with legal action by the Trappist organisation, and this meant that they had to change the name to Het Kapittel, basically the small capital. But in 1962, as I mentioned earlier, the brewery transferred to the Leroy family, and Carl Leroy began to take an active part in this brewery as well. In 1981 he created the Poppering's Homer beer, and later in 1985 he created the Watou's Wit beer. So those two beers, along with the Kapittel series, are the main ones that you find released under Leroy's Van Ecke brand. Under the Het Sass name they produce a number of different beers of Belgian and German styles. There's a Westpils in there, there was a Bock beer, there was a stout I think as well. So yeah, a lot of different German and Belgian style beers are released under the Brouwerij Het Sass name. But by 2015 the company collectively was producing around 28,000 hectolitres of beer per year, and I think in total from both of these breweries combined you're getting somewhere in the region of 15 or 16 different beers released. I think it's about 8 or 9, I think it's about 8 or so are released under the Brouwerij Van Ecke brands, and then there's another 8 or so released under the Brouwerij Het Sass brands as well. So yeah, a little bit of a complicated history this one, but basically, as I mentioned to you earlier, the Leroy Breweries company, composed of two separate two conjoined organisations now. One of them based in Watou, Brouwerij Van Ecke based in Watou, and Brouwerij Het Sass, who are based in Boezinge, which is where the Leroy company itself is actually based. So yeah, one of these, they had their own brewery. The family had one brewery, and then they inherited another a little bit later on, which is quite unusual actually, I have to say. But I do like the fact that they've basically maintained both of these brands. I think it's very important for these very old companies that you'll find in the likes of Germany and Belgium and things to maintain the kind of almost independence and maintain both names actually. So yeah, a really interesting one this, and the history a little bit different compared to some of the others, so that makes it a little bit unique, and I hope that the beer is pretty quirky in that sense as well. So yeah, that's all I really can tell you at the moment about Leroy Breweries and Brouwerij Van Ecke and Brouwerij Het Sass. I hope you enjoyed that little history section. It was a little bit complicated to try and piece that together, but I hope that it does kind of make sense to you. Under the Kapittel name they've got a Tripel, I think they've got a blonde beer, there's a wit beer I think in there as well, and they've got a few other kind of things too. So hopefully you can see me review a few more of the Kapittel beers over the coming years, but this is one that I thought would be very, very interesting for the moment. I can't remember where I got this beer, but I have had this one at least for a year or two, so it should be in very nice condition. But yeah, let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself. And as I always say, check out the brewery website in the description below, see if they've got some social media and follow them on there to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Beer Advocate and Untappd pages to learn a bit more about all the different beers from Brouwerij Van Ecke and Brouwerij Het Sass. But you might also want to search for Leroy Breweries. I'm not sure how they will be listed. But as you can see, and as I told you already, this beer brand was founded back in 1950, originally brewing Trappist style beers, and you can see there are the fathers obviously just enjoying a few beers. The thing that they used to do, of course, was they used to go to, when they were on Lent, they used to drink liquid bread, also known as beer, and that was the way they kind of got around the whole kind of Lent idea. There you can see the Kapittel Prior 9 top on this one, and there you can see Prior Watou as well. As I said, that is where Brouwerij Van Ecke actually come from, and it says on the side here, this one is produced by Brouwerij Van Ecke. Yeah, Brouwerij Van Ecke, Watou, Belgium. So yeah, it doesn't actually have a bottling date on this one, but it does say it's best before the 13th of December 2019. So I'm actually reviewing this one for you when it's about 6 months out of date, but it is a Belgian Quadrupel, so it's quite difficult for these things to go out of date, and it has been kept in the fridge, it's been kept chilled and dark, so it should be pretty good actually. But yeah, you can see these guys are also part of the Belgian Family Brewers organisation there. So yeah, without further ado then, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting. Then a 9% Belgian style dark ale, but I think it probably is going to be basically similar to a Belgian style quadrupel. So yeah, the other one that was the Kapittel Donker. There was that whole thing where, you know, I think it's basically a technicality. I think the beers, obviously all of these Trappist breweries do have their own house yeast strains and things like this, but I think from a kind of technical perspective, it's more a sort of legality thing. If a beer is not produced in the Trappist method, you can't call it a quadrupel, basically, or a tripel or whatever. I think that is the main distinction between a lot of these things. So you'll find a lot of beers that are quite similar to Trappist beers in Belgium, but technically they are not, of course. So yeah, this one I think should be very, very nice actually. I'm really curious to see how this one turns out. So yeah, as you can see, and as you would kind of expect from this sort of quadrupel Belgian strong dark style of beer, this one's poured a lovely kind of rich kind of cherry wood mahogany type colour, actually a chestnutty type colour. If I shine the light through it, it's actually got a very nice kind of reddish tint to it. It is a little bit more like a kind of cherry wood or a chestnutty colour. I'm not sure how well that is showing up on the camera right enough, but it does look very, very nice. There's a good few wee little bits of sediment floating around in this one, and of course Belgian beers do tend to be bottle conditioned. They put a bit more yeast in them and let them, you know, ferment and age over time. The only thing you have to watch, of course, with these is that sometimes they can explode when you open them. That's one of the frustrations we'll have a little bit about Belgian beer, but you know, most of the time it doesn't happen. It's only happened like 3 or 4 times on the channel with Belgian beer. But yeah, as you can see with this one, it poured with a nice I would say kind of very light beigey fawn coloured head. It came in around a half or a third of a head. They've got 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but you know, overall it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. It's pretty much what you would expect from either a Belgian strong dark ale or a Belgian style quadrupel. The one thing I would say about this is that I think this is a little bit low in alcohol for a Belgian quadrupel. I think most of the quadrupels tend to be 10, 10.5, sometimes 11% ABV. I think the Kapittel Donker, if I remember rightly, which is one of the other ones I was talking about, that is you know, kind of close to the style but not technically a quadrupel. I'm sure that's like 11% or something like that. But yeah, it looks like a very nice beer. Nothing overly surprising about it in terms of appearance. Good little bit of sediment kind of floating around, but when you put it up to the light, you can see it does actually have a degree of clarity to it. So yeah, should be quite nice, this one. Let's look at the aroma then and just see how we get on. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. And I will say that smells beautiful. It really does. That smells very, very nice. I wish I knew how old this beer was. I really do. Because it doesn't say, it doesn't have a bottle date on it. I don't know. I get a feeling this might actually be, if it says Brouwerij van Ecke on it, it might actually have been from before the Leroy Breweries organisation was actually, the umbrella organisation was made. So this beer might well be, I think usually they put about 5 years or something on this, and I know that I've had this beer at least 2 years. I'm pretty sure I got this one from Beers of Europe actually, in England, because I made an order of Belgian beers because I wanted to review more Belgian beers, and I'm sure it came in part of that actually, and I just never got around to it. So I've had this beer quite a while actually, somewhere between 2.5, somewhere around 2.5 years. So I don't know how long Beers of Europe would have had it. So this beer is actually aged quite nicely, and these quadrupels, Belgian strong dark ales, they can age very, very nicely, and this one's just got some lovely aromas to it. So straight away with this one, the first thing you're going to notice is that lovely kind of brown sugary note that comes out of this, the doughy yeasty notes in there. You've got that kind of lovely kind of buttery brown bread that comes out of this one. It's almost a very kind of sweet, almost like rye breadish quality. It reminds me a little bit of a kind of German rye bread, to be honest, but it's a little bit more kind of sweeter and well-rounded than that. There's a lot of brown sugar coming out of this one. You've got that lovely, very, very kind of sweet caramel in there. It's got a little bit of that almost kind of caramelly, wafery sort of thing to it, which is lovely. Very kind of there's a good little bit of a kind of almost Werther's Original butterscotchy type aroma coming out of this beer as well, which is just lovely. The brown sugars in this one are very, very sweet, not very dark as you can sometimes get, so there's not really treacle or molasses to this one. Sweet caramel, butterscotch, Werther's Original, which is nice. It almost gives you the impression of having a little bit of woodiness to it as well. There's a lot of kind of woody undertones to this beer. It almost has a little bit of that kind of oaky, vanilla-y type quality to it as well. So some lovely woody oaky notes to the beer. Good little touch of nuttiness, I think, as well. I really like how that side of the beer, I really like how that part of the beer kind of goes together, to be honest with you. I mean, it's very, very nice in that regard. The malty and yeasty part of this beer, I think, is absolutely lovely. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in terms of the malty side of the aroma there. It's got everything you would want from Belgian strong dark ale or Belgian style quadrupel, whichever category we're kind of going to term this one in. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, this one, it's got a very kind of light earthiness to it. When this beer I think is at least 2.5 years old, you're not going to get so much in the way of the hoppy characters. But yeah, there is a wee touch of earthiness to this one. It almost comes across as being a little bit herbal, wee touch of floral note, and a good little bit of lighter kind of grassiness in there as well. But as I say, the hops very much take a back seat in this beer, and that's quite common with most Belgian beers, to be honest with you. These beers are more about the yeasts and the malts rather than anything else. So yeah, that's not surprising at all. And Belgian hops, as I've told you before, they're kind of like a cross between English hops, which are a bit more herbal and earthy, and German hops, which are a bit brighter and grassy. The Belgian hops kind of find themselves somewhere in the middle of that. A little bit of the herbal character from the English hops, and a wee bit more of a kind of German bright earthiness, and more of a kind of German grassy floral note as well, to be honest with you. So yeah, the hoppy side of this beer is very, very nice. On the fruity side of things, it's quite interesting. It's got a lovely kind of juicy, figgy kind of quality to it. There's a little bit of a kind of thicker plummy note also. So yeah, figs and plums I think definitely in this one, and you might get the impression of a little bit of a kind of black curranty note out of this one as well. So very kind of sweet and very kind of candied in a lot of ways with its fruity notes, to be honest. So I really like how how the aroma of this beer goes together. Actually, it's a lovely, it's got a lovely smell to it, this one. So big thumbs up to Leroy Breweries, or Brouwerij van Ecke, however you want to term it for this one. They've pulled off a very, very nice aroma with this beer. Definitely one of the more kind of buttery, butterscotchy type Belgian style quadrupels, or Belgian strong dark ales, whatever you want to say, that I've come across. So yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one, because I think it is pretty damn good. But like I say, I'm not sure exactly how old this beer is, so the aroma might vary a little bit from what I've just described to you. But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. This one is the Brouwerij van Ecke Kapittel Prior 9 from the Leroy Breweries group, based in Boezinge, and brewed at Watou in Flanders, or Vlaanderen, Flandre in Belgium. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, Skål, Santé, Prost. The carbonation on that is pretty damn active, I have to say. Yeah, but I like how this, I really like how this goes together actually. It's nicely done. So thumbs up to Leroy Breweries group for this. I think this has turned out very nicely, and as I said, it is a few months kind of out of date, this one, but I still think it comes across pretty damn solidly. So yeah, we'll let them away with that, but that's my fault really, obviously. It takes your mouth a bit of time just to adjust to everything that's going on in this one, but I will say it comes across quite differently in the flavour to what it does in the aroma. It's the brown sugars from here are a little bit darker than I was expecting, but the aroma I think was beautiful, as I say, but the flavour is very nice as well. One thing I will say about this beer too is that it is, the first impression I have of this is that it's actually, I think this one probably, in terms of its flavour profile, it does fit more of the kind of Belgian strong dark ale, to be honest with you. The carbonation is making it feel very, very light, but that's again because it's the bottle fermentation has been going so long, to be honest with you, because it is an older, you know, it is an older beer. So that is one of the things you have to be conscious of with Belgian beers. If you age them a bit longer, I think the mouthfeel will drop off a little bit, because the kind of bottle conditioning actually, so be aware of that when you try these styles of beer. But this one I think definitely is more of a Belgian strong dark ale. To me it just doesn't feel quite as thick as you might normally get from a quadrupel, and it's not quite as sweet either. I think the brown sugars have got a lot more darkness to them than I was expecting from the aroma, so that's a really interesting point to make about this beer. But I will say I like this one, I do like this one. And I think the more that I drink of it, actually, my mouth is kind of sweetening up to it a little bit, but it takes a few sips to just kind of get everything that this beer is trying to give you. So yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this one a little bit then. So straight away with this beer, you can feel a nice little bit of a kind of malty base there. That blankets the middle of your tongue. On top of that, you start to get some of the kind of thicker, more brown bready notes. If you go towards the back of the palate, you do get a little bit of graininess coming out of the beer, which is quite nice. But then in the very centre of your tongue, as I say, you get that nice kind of brown bready, almost like a bowl. But then in the very centre of your palate, you do get a little bit, you get quite a bit of a kind of darker brown sugar, to be honest, which is quite nice. And then it gets gradually sweeter the further that you go into the aftertaste as well. If you move out from that very centre of your palate, there's a wee bit more of a kind of biscuity note with this one as well that comes out. But the brown sugars almost have a little bit of this kind of cough syrupy, slightly phenolic type quality to them as well. They do come across as being quite caramelised and quite dark, almost similar in a way a little bit to like an English barley wine, come to think of it. So that's an interesting point to make about this one. But as I said, the more that you drink of this, your mouth adjusts to it and it does gradually get a little bit sweeter. I actually don't know how long you're supposed to boil a Belgian beer for, because the thing that you do with brewing to get the more kind of caramelised sugars and things like that is you do a longer boil, and obviously the two things that affect your kind of colour of the beer, it's how long you boil it for, how long the sugars caramelise, and it's the type of malt. So those are the two factors that you've got to consider here. And I'd be curious to know how long the boil is on this beer. The Belgian beers, of course, do take a hell of a long time to to ferment and be ready, of course, as well. But yeah, this one to me, the brown sugars in the middle of the palate that sit there do strike me as being a little bit more kind of highly caramelised, and there's just a little touch of that kind of cough syrupy, medicinal, phenolic type thing coming out of this one too, which is quite nice. But yeah, on the front corners of the palate then, if you go in a little bit and back, you get some nice kind of woody notes out of the beer, and really the further you go into the aftertaste, really on the front part of the palate, you start to get some lovely sweetness out of the beer. At this point in time, I'm getting some really nice kind of toffee-ish notes out of it as well, which is very interesting. So yeah, on the front corners of the palate, like I say, go back a little bit and then you'll find some woody undertones kind of sitting there. If you go to the very centre of your tongue, that's where you get the quite intense caramel with a bit of that almost a treacly, phenolic type thing. Then as you move further forward from that, if you go directly forward, you start to get the sweeter kind of butterscotchy type notes out of the beer, slightly sweeter caramel, and you've also got a few sort of nutty undertones coming out of it too, which is very, very nice. So yeah, that gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, I do like how this one goes together in that sense. It does sweeten up. The more and more that you drink of this beer, the more it certainly does sweeten up a little bit. But I think we've kind of discussed the kind of malty and yeasty part of this beer quite well. I do like it. It does. I find in the aftertaste you do get more of a graininess out of it towards the back of the palate, and you start to get a bit more in the aftertaste. It does start to lean a little bit more towards the darker side of the kind of brown sugars and things like that as well. So that's an interesting point to make about this one. On the back corners of the palate, you've got a little touch of earthiness coming out of it. As you come further forward along the sides of the palate too, you start to get more of a kind of herbally type note out of it, and as you reach the front corners of the palate, there's just a little very slight remnant of a kind of floral thing. As I said, when this beer is at least in the bottle for probably 3 years, I think at minimum, most of the hoppy character is going to have dropped off, but you do still get a little touch of a floral note in the front corners of the palate. Round the front curve of the tongue, you've got a little bit of that lighter kind of grassy thing It doesn't really have much of a zestiness to it, as you can sometimes get when these beers are a bit fresh, but then behind the front curve of the palate, the front third of the tongue is where you get that nice oily bubble, where the juicy fruity esters start to come out of the beer. So let's examine that a little bit more closely. So yeah, the fruity side of things is quite nice as well. When you take this in, you do get some lovely kind of figgy and plummy notes out of it. I think it's more plummy in the beginning, but then it really starts to kind of juicing up a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste. The further you go into the aftertaste, you're going to get a few kind of blackberry, blackcurranty notes out of the beer. I do wonder, maybe they've used a wee touch of kind of Northern Brewer from Germany in this one to give you the nice kind of fruity notes, because there is just something a little bit reminiscent about a Doppelbock, about the fruitiness of this beer actually. So I wouldn't be surprised if they've used a little bit of German Northern Brewer or something in here. It's a very nice hop to give you those kind of fruity notes. There are other ones, of course, you could use. You could use American Eureka, you could use English Bramling's Cross, and you could even use a little bit of Cascade probably to give you things like this as well. But I think it's most likely to be a German Northern Brewer, probably, just going by the fruity flavours that I'm getting out of this one. But the further you go into the aftertaste, some of the dark brown sugars linger there in the middle of your palate. You've got a bit of graininess pushes its way out in this beer too, and then you've got some of the kind of hoppy earthiness and stuff as well. So yeah, I think in terms of its flavour profile, it's definitely more apt to describe this beer as a Belgian dark strong ale, because it doesn't quite have the thickness, and the breadiness doesn't feel quite as thick as you would normally get from a straight up quadrupel. So that's an interesting point to make about this one. And in fairness, the other point you should make here is that this one, for what should be the equivalent of a quadrupel, it's 9% rather than 10.5. So maybe that is a kind of critical difference. I mean, normally I would think that a 9%er should be a tripel rather than a quadrupel. You always associate a quadrupel being at least 10%, or maybe, I don't know if I've seen one or two that are 9.5. So yeah, I think this one is just a little bit low in the alcohol for a quadrupel, but it just doesn't feel quite as thick for me. But the flavour profile is certainly quite nice, and it's got most of what you would expect from that kind of style of beer. So yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me. We can sit and talk about styles of beer and categorising and things like that all day, but the main question should be, is this a good beer? And I have to say, I think it is quite nice. I'd love to try the Tripel from these guys and see how that one turns out, and some of the other beers as well. So yeah, maybe I can try a few more from Brouwerij van Ecke or Brouwerij Het Saas at some point as well. But yeah, I think this one is a nice beer. Let's look at the mouthfeel then. So yeah, I'd say this beer is fairly kind of mid-bodied. Definitely not the thickest of Belgian beers that I've come across. The carbonation is quite active in this, but again we have to take that with a pinch of salt, because this beer has been in the bottle for a good couple of years. So yeah, it does come across as quite crisp in that way. The more that your tongue adjusts to it, the more you get used to it, and it can overpower it. It actually overpowers the flavour a little bit earlier on. But yeah, I like how that side of the beer goes together. So, and generally speaking, I would say that this is quite it's almost got a little bit of crispness to it, to be honest with you, but you've got a nice little bit of wetness, wee touch of oiliness, and yeah, I think it's fair to describe this beer as fairly kind of mid-bodied and almost a little bit crisp and wet at the same time. So I like how that side of it goes together. In terms of the kind of the hoppy side of the beer, I think we're looking at maybe a 20 IBU mark or something like this. There's not really a lot of bitterness out of this one, but again, you have to remember it's 3 years old, and most of the hops will have kind of dropped off in this one. And again, the Quadrupel Belgian strong dark ale is not the hoppiest style of beer that you're going to have, so very, very low IBUs in this one. Malt based, like I say, has a good bit of darker note to it, a little bit of toastiness as well. Not as thick as you can get from some within this dark strong Belgian ale category, but the fruitiness, I think, is quite nice. It's not got the most phenolic of fruitiness either. It seems like a bit more of a juicy fruitiness. This maybe even a little touch oily as well, but it's another nice example of the Belgian dark strong ales, and I wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. So yeah, my first Belgian beer in quite a wee while, I think, but I definitely need to try and review a few more. I need to make another order somewhere of some of the classic Belgian beers and get a few more of those reviewed up for you. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. I think this has been an interesting beer to try, and I hope you guys have enjoyed my thoughts on this one as well. So yeah, this one was the Kapittel, the Kapittel Prior 9 from Brouwerij van Ecke and Watou, part of the Leroy Breweries group in Flanders, Flanders in the west of Belgium. A really nice beer to review, a 9%er, I would say a dark Belgian strong ale rather than anything else. So yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Leroy Breweries or Brouwerij van Ecke and Brouwerij Hitsass as well. Hopefully I can review more from these guys at some point soon. Hope you've enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys very soon. The Kapittel Prior 9, a 9% Belgian strong dark ale from Brouwerij van Ecke, part of the Leroy Breweries group, brewed in Watou, but based in Boezinge in Flanders in the west of Belgium, very close to Ypres. Slange, Skål, Prost, Santé. Cheers.